Everything seems to be, no, not quite. Just give me one moment while we work this out. And I think we're about to go. This is a live stream. This is Good Friday. And yes, it's my birthday, but that's nothing to do about that. I guess what I want to know is, why can't anyone prove that God exists? I mean, it should be a fairly simple thing. It's fairly straightforward. I mean, the problem here is, I think, is the fact that we have the Bible. It says God exists. And God exists because we have the Bible. But then we have the Bible that says God exists. It just keeps going around in circles. So I think what we need to do is to work out some facts. And I think I have it, but I guess I want to go through a few of the problems as well. I mean, a lot of people will tell you about the religious experience, and that's fine for them. And I mean, I can be one of those that have that religious experience and can say, this is what happened for me. But the problem is, for you, it's completely different. And you think, well, okay, that's great for you, but my experience shows that it doesn't prove anything. So I guess the other problem is, we have this inner sense of right and wrong. But the problem there is, okay, we can say, yes, that is a gift from God. He is the one that is the moral standard, and from him everything goes out as the moral standard. However, we all know that if I shoot Hitler, okay, the moral standard is probably everybody will think, okay, that's great. But if I shoot you, no one's going to think that's great. So working out the sense of right and wrong is not going to work out anything. It really just goes around in circles just as much as the God versus Bible argument. Some theologians have sat down and gone through the cosmological argument, which is the first cause. And this is the argument that we have when we're a parent and we have a 4-year-old or even 2-year-old for that matter, and that everything that comes out of their mouth is why. Why is a carrot? It doesn't matter. You could start from something simple and innocent, and if the argument could just keep coming back as why, I guess the first cause will always come back to, well, just God says it so that's it. Which is usually a passive-aggressive for our 4-year-old. But the problem is, it really doesn't answer anything, because we always come back to, well, what caused God? Now, obviously, there is the argument that God is a being outside of time, and that he is not part of time, and he created us in time as well as time. But for some people, that's still not a hard enough fact to go by. Then there's the theological argument. Now this one is the argument from design. So basically, we can look at nature. There is the golden rule. I can't remember the exact measurement, but it basically is designed for shells. It's designed for flowers that use this rule, as well as even galaxies. Galaxies use this rule. As they swirl around, they are being defined by this rule. There is also things that are put together that just can't be put together by accident and must have a cause, obviously, cause going back to God. Now, the problem here is that, well, I guess the other side of the argument is I guess there is the puddle argument. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's okay. It's basically a puddle is sitting in a hole in the ground, and it is thinking, well, this is a nice place. And it said, this hole fits me exactly. I'm a puddle of water and it fits me exactly. So this hole is designed for me. Now, of course, that is just perspective, and it's saying, well, just because the hole is exactly your size doesn't mean that it was created for you. So the argument again just goes around in circles. Then there's the ontological argument. Now I'm definitely going to have to read this one, and this one's a bit of a mind bender, and I think this one puts everybody into confusion, so much so that at the end of it they just go, well, I guess. I'll show you what I mean. If God is the greatest being to ever exist, then he must exist, for he does it. Sorry, I'll start again. If God is the greatest being to ever exist, then he must exist, for if he doesn't exist, then he isn't the greatest being to ever exist. Therefore, God exists. Yeah, okay. That basically just comes down to I'm going to drive you crazy and mind-numbing, and you think, well, okay, whatever. So all of these arguments seem to go around in circles, and it depends on your point of view. You could have the positive point of view and say God exists, but then you could have the other side of that and say God doesn't exist for sometimes the same reasons. So that really isn't going to answer anything. So I think we need to step back and go back to facts. So what are those facts? Okay, I think, and the other thing is, it's all very good to say the Bible says it so, and again that comes back to that first argument, the Bible being fulfilling its own prophecy and everything. However, I think what we need is some facts that are outside the Bible that can give us some, well, facts basically. So what I've got is a list of things here. Now, one of the facts that Jesus exists in time. So he's not something that is just written in a book and it's a good theory and, well, it's just a nice way to tell stories to your kids so they come up being nice to others and apparently being nice to you when you're old. So, some facts. So one of these is there is a theologian back in now I think it was the 1st century or thereabouts. Now this is a Roman statistician. His name is Tacitus. Now he wrote 50 years after Nero did these acts, and obviously Nero wasn't around so he could probably talk about it, but Nero basically burnt a whole heap of, well, that's the theory, that he burnt a whole heap of houses and blamed the Christians on it. Now Tacitus, basically he wrote down, and I'll read what he wrote down. He said, therefore, to put down the rumour, Nero substituted as culprits and punished in the most unusual ways those hated for their shameful acts, whom the crowd called Christians. The founder of his name, Christus in Latin, had been executed in the reign of Tiberius by the procurator Pontius Pilate. Suppressed for a time, the deadly superstition erupted again, not only in Judea, the origin of this evil, but also in the city of Rome, where all things are horrible and shameful, for everywhere come together and become popular. Now, as you can see, he's not writing this as to say, oh, God's wonderful, Jesus is wonderful, and I'm just trying to blemish something. Blemish is probably the wrong word. Make it seem nice. You can really see that he really doesn't like the Christians, but also he's trying to put Nero on the witness stand, I guess, and say that he did this. So he wasn't putting anybody in any good light. And this is a historical document that is verified. So that is fact. Then also, and I'll go over the page, we have another document which is Flavius Josephus. Now Flavius Josephus was originally Jewish. Well, I guess he's still Jewish. But there was a big Jewish rebellion. He crossed sides and became a Roman statistician himself. Now, it is very clear that he also does not like Jesus or the Christians. Now, one of the statements that he wrote, being therefore this kind of person a heartless Sadducee, Ananias, thinking that he had a favourable opportunity because Festus, who had died, and Albinus was still on his way, called a meeting of judges and brought it into, called a meeting of judges and brought them into the brother of Jesus, who is called Messiah, James by name, and some others. He made the accusation that they had transgressed the law, and he handed them over to be stoned. Now, there's a whole heap of political stuff in the background of that I'm not going to go through because it really defeats what I'm trying to do today. But again, it is another, and I actually think Flavius Josephus is actually before Tacitus. Now, both of these people are Roman statisticians. Sorry, it's a bit of a tongue twister. And I guess it is also, the point is that they would have had good contact with, is that the right word? Probably not. They had information and statistics and everything at their hand that we don't have today. Now, there is a third one. It also is with Josephus. Now, the problem here is a lot of people debunk this one. So there's 2 out of the 3. They debunk the third one, and then they kind of go, well, all of them fall down. But the problem here is Josephus wrote that he wrote this statement, and during the course of time and people copying it and copying it again, there was probably someone who was in a Christian persuasion, put a bit of floral Christian wording in there, and now it kind of makes it seem like Josephus is on the Christian side, and I guess saying it's floral probably explains it a bit. Now, there's been a lot of debate over the years whether he wrote the whole lot, he wrote none of it, he wrote some of it. Now, the thing is, since this whole discussion, since then, there actually has been found the original document without the floral additions. Now, I've got the ones here, and maybe I'll put my hand up for the floral bit so you can get what I mean. But the problem is, so I guess the thing is, if you take out the floral bits and you keep the original text, which has been, I guess, surfaced with just the original text, it then confirms what... It confirms it, basically. And you wonder why I do YouTube. Around this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he was one who did surprising deeds as a teacher. So that's still... Okay. I think I need to read this again. Around this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For one he was... I can't read this. I'll try again. Around this time there lived a man, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was one who did surprising deeds, and a teacher such people as accepting the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many Greeks. He was the Messiah. There's one bit there. When Pilate, upon hearing him accused by men of the highest standing among us, and he condemned him to be crucified, those who in the first place came to love him, who did not give up their affection for him. For on the third day he appeared to them restored to life the prophets of God, and prophesied this and countless other marvellous things about him. Then back to Josephus. And the tribe of Christians so called after him, they still to this day have not died out. Sorry, I probably didn't read that perfectly, and I do apologise for that, but you can read this online, and it's probably best you read this online because you probably think, what did I just read? Anyway, I guess the thing is, there are 3 historical facts and things written down that Jesus did exist. And further to that, there is also with Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate was a real person as well. And even in this, it states that Pontius Pilate was the person who crucified Jesus on the cross. and that there was actual a stone that was found that Pontius Pilate dedicated a theatre to a Roman emperor at the time. So those are hard facts, and I would even go further to say that people have gone over this, and I just want to read a statement from Bart Ehrman, who is a a biblical critic, if that's, I think there's a different word for that. So basically he researches the Bible, but he doesn't actually believe Jesus was real. He doesn't believe God is real. So Bart Ehrman, a scholar, he writes, "The reality is that every single author who mentions Jesus, pagan, Christian or Jewish, basically everyone, was fully convinced that he at the least lived. Even the enemies of Jesus' movement thought so. Among their many slurs against religion, his non-existence is never one of them. Jesus certainly existed." So obviously, I mean, there's the cliche that he's either a thief, a charlatan, or he is who he says he is. Now, I feel that this is a very accurate historical documents that prove that there was a man named Jesus who was crucified, dead and buried, which backs up the biblical account. Now, I feel that this is proof that Jesus did exist. Now, you might be saying, well, he could be a thief. Well, sorry, he's either a charlatan. Again, why do I do these YouTube things? He's either a charlatan, he's either a madman, or who he says he is. So if he's a charlatan, he's not a very good one, because at the end of it, he ends up on the cross. Now, he didn't have to. If he was a charlatan, he had actually about 2 or 3, maybe even 4 points that he could have actually said, well, you know what, no, I'm not going to go through with this, and he could have talked his way out of it, and the Bible would never have documented it, and it would have been over. Yet, he kept going forward with saying, yes, I am God, and so that rules that one out. He could have been a madman who believed that he was Jesus, and he was who the Bible said he was. But again, the disciples that were around him at the time when he was going through his ministry, they were prepared to die for him. So the problem there is, why were they going to die for someone that's a madman? They would have clearly seen and been able to discern whether he was crazy or not. So there's that. So I feel that with all of this evidence that Jesus existed, the Bible actually has 300 predictions of Jesus' birth and dying on the cross. Actually, I'll correct that. There is actually 100 that came to be that actually have happened. And these were predictions from thousands of years before. And then at Jesus dying on the cross came to be. The 200 that haven't been yet are actually Jesus' second coming. So they're still to happen. So they're still in the air. They're still waiting. So basically, every prediction that the Old Testament has stated has either come to be or is still predicting it to be. So far, 100%. I feel with all of this evidence, and then you can even put all these cosmological argument and the teleological argument, or the first cause and the argument for design. I think if you put all these together, it proves that Jesus existed, the Bible is saying what it says is true, and God exists. Now, you may think that this argument is still just the same as this third one. If God is the greatest being to ever exist, then he would exist. I feel that this is just too great an argument to say that God doesn't exist. And I feel that, I mean, I even thought the other day, I think therefore I exist. I feel that everything proves that God exists. I guess even though I feel that these are facts that you can't deny, I know there are still somebody that's going to say, well, you know what, that may be your experience or your thoughts. They're not mine. And okay, I think we can all come together and just go, okay, that's fine. And you're allowed to have those thoughts as well. But I feel that yes, he does exist. Jesus did exist. He did die on the cross. And today being Good Friday, it just puts everything in more stark contrast, I guess, that he did exist. It did happen. He did die for our sins. And it just makes this Easter, even though we're all hemmed in and we can't go and see others and we can't go to church meetings or friends, and even giving out of Easter eggs is going to be hard. In this time, I think we just need to remember his sacrifice that he gave for us. And basically the end, he just wants us to get to heaven to be with him. Okay, that pretty much ends this. Go do something awesome for God. We'll catch you in the next one.